She paid for a baby and accidentally got pregnant with a Mafia king's heir. She thought she was buying safety, privacy, and a quiet future. Instead, one fertility clinic mistake turns her into the center of a bloody underworld war. The donor was never supposed to matter, but this one, he's Gabriel Rossi, the most ruthless crime boss in Boston, and the second he finds out a total stranger is carrying his child, her normal life is over. No romance, no warning, just one shocking truth: she didn't buy a dream. She bought a death sentence.
All she ever craved was a child, the gentle rhythm of an ordinary life with a little one to call her own. At a discreet clinic, she chose a future from a screen, a faceless benefactor for an impossible sum. The transaction was meant to be sterile, clean, secure. But the life she was given came not from a kind-hearted student or a brilliant altruist. It came from the most cold-blooded figure on the eastern seaboard, a man who buries his secrets. He was supposed to be a ghost in the system, but the criminal world has a way of finding its own, and her simple existence is about to be torn apart. She purchased a new beginning, and in doing so, ignited a conflict. The Lane Institute of Family Planning resided atop a glittering glass tower in Boston's core. This was a clinic that existed only in whispers, a place you found through hushed referrals. For Scarlett Hayes, a 32-year-old restorer of old buildings, the path here cost her 6 months and a devastating share of her savings. She waited, twisting a silver band on her right hand, a nervous habit in a room that smelled of costly flowers and antiseptic. It was a strange perfume, designed to calm the city's wealthiest patrons. She was not among them. She was a woman hearing not a tick, but a final chime from her biological clock. After 2 broken promises and a cruel medical verdict, Scarlett had arrived at the most terrifying and freeing choice of her life. She would raise this child on her own. A nurse in crisp white scrubs led Miss Hayes into the lavish sanctuary of Dr. Alistair Lane. He was a man with silver hair, a politician's practiced smile, and the calculating gaze of a predator. He motioned her to a seat before his immense mahogany desk. "Scarlett, I'm so glad we can conclude this," Dr. Lane began, his finger tapping a tablet. "Your labs are perfect. Hormones are ideal for this cycle's procedure. We simply need to verify your choice." He pushed the device toward her. It displayed a confidential file, Profile 409. Ethnicity, Italian-American. Height, 6'3". Occupation, private equity. Health, exceptional, with 0 genetic red flags and a high IQ. Images were forbidden. The Lane Institute's strict policy to shield the identities of their high net worth contributors. In place of a face, there was only a soundbite. A low, gravelly voice reciting some unremarkable poem alongside a catalog of attributes. Dark hair, startlingly pale blue eyes, a powerful physique. "He's perfect," Scarlett murmured, her finger ghosting over the screen's frame. "Almost too perfect." Her doubt surfaced. "Are you certain he's waived all rights? I need to know no one will ever come looking for my baby." Dr. Lane smiled, a well-rehearsed gesture of comfort. "Profile 409 is among our most protected. The sample was given years ago before a high-risk surgery. He has no desire for a family. He's bound by an unbreakable non-disclosure and relinquishment contract. He's a ghost, Scarlett, nothing more than the genetic architecture for your dream." A long-held breath escaped her lips. "Then let's do it. Let's make a life." 2 weeks passed, and the clinical part was over. 4 weeks later, Scarlett perched on her porcelain bathtub's edge, gazing at a small plastic wand. 2 bright pink lines answered her prayers. Her hands flew to her mouth as tears of pure, unbridled happiness streamed down her face. She was pregnant. The next 4 months were a tender blur of prenatal vitamins, sonograms, and coating the walls of a spare room in her Cambridge home, with the softest shade of yellow. At 18 weeks, she felt the first faint kicks. A boy, her son. It was a happiness so complete, so pure, she existed within its fragile walls. A bubble, waiting for the bullet that would surely come. Gabriel Rossi did not deal in ghosts. He created them. 30 miles from Scarlett's quiet world, in the shadowed bowels of a dockside warehouse, the air was thick with the metallic tang of beer. Gabriel, leader of the Rossi Syndicate, flicked a drop of crimson from his custom Tom Ford suit. At 34, he commanded the city's dark heart with a terrifying stillness, his power an iron fist sheathed in velvet. Before him, a broken accountant gasped for air, bound to a steel chair. "I will not ask again, Ree." Gabriel's voice was a deep, resonant hum in the cavernous room. "Where is my money? The 3 million cleaned through the network of clinics. It couldn't simply disappear." "Lane!" The man wept, a spray of red hitting the floor. "Dr. Lane! His gambling debts were bad. The Irish were on him. He took the money, Mr. Rossi. He drained the accounts to save his own skin." Gabriel's pale blue eyes became chips of ice. Dr. Alistair Lane. Gabriel's money had built that institute, a respectable face for his dirty business. But his ties to the place ran deeper than just finance. 5 years prior, after a near-fatal attack that put a bullet millimeters from his spine, Gabriel had left a part of himself there. A final measure, at his late father's insistence, to guarantee the Rossi name would endure should he not survive the operation. But he had survived, and the vault was forgotten. "Silas," Gabriel spoke softly to his massive second-in-command, a figure lurking in the darkness. "Deal with Ree, then prepare the cars. We're going to see the good doctor." An hour passed. The glass entrance of the Lane Institute exploded inwards. After midnight, the building was a tomb, lit only by emergency floods. Gabriel and 3 of his men silenced the security systems with savage speed. They discovered Dr. Lane in his office, desperately packing bundles of cash and bearer bonds into a leather bag. The click of the closing double doors made him freeze solid. Gabriel was framed in his doorway, a suppressed Beretta held loosely at his side. "Leaving us, Alistair?" Gabriel's tone was dangerously mild as he entered. "Gabriel, Mr. Rossi, the money I can explain. It's a short-term problem. I was going to pay it all back." A single raised hand from Gabriel cut him off. "I'm not concerned about the money, Alistair. 3 million is pocket change. I am, however, concerned with loyalty. You have betrayed mine." At Gabriel's signal, Silas moved, forcing Lane down onto his own mahogany desk. Silas accessed the clinic's encrypted primary database on the computer. "The inventory," Gabriel commanded. "I want a full accounting of what this vermin sold to pay his way." Silas's hands blurred over the keys, cracking the encryption with a powerful drive. A torrent of names, ledgers, and biological files filled the display. Then Silas froze, his massive frame tensed. "Boss," he said, his voice tight with an unfamiliar note. "You need to see this." Gabriel moved behind the desk. The screen showed the access log for Vault 7, Gabriel's own private vault. Asset profile 409. Status withdrawn. Transfer date 5 months prior. Recipient Scarlett Hayes. Affiliation civilian, none. The room went dead silent, the air thick and heavy. Gabriel's pale blue eyes turned a shade of violent storm cloud as he stared. The truth struck him with the force of a punch to the gut. His legacy, the Rossi heir, had been stolen and sold, and was now growing inside a woman he'd never met. His hand moved like a viper, closing around Dr. Lane's throat with vicious, crushing power. He lifted the man from his feet. "What have you done?" Gabriel snarled, his civilized mask gone, leaving only the beast. I needed money," Lane gasped, his face darkening. "She was desperate. She gave $500,000 under the table for premium genetics. I altered the records. I swear she has no idea who you are. She thinks you're an investor." "You sold my child," Gabriel stated, the words bitter on his tongue. He knew if the rival Corsetti family discovered this, they would move without mercy. They would hunt this woman down. They would slaughter her and his unborn child to destroy his bloodline and shatter his mind. Gabriel released his grip. Lane collapsed to the ground, gagging. Without a glance, Gabriel leveled the Beretta and fired 2 shots. The soft coughs of the silenced weapon were the last sounds the doctor ever heard. "Incinerate the servers. Erase this entire building," Gabriel commanded Silas, his voice a chilling monotone. "And get me everything on Scarlett Hayes. Her job, her home, her habits. I want her located before sunrise." As he spoke, a storm broke loose over Boston. Just as Scarlett turned the lock on her front door, rain hammered the old cobblestones, carried on a furious wind. She was precisely 22 weeks along. A gentle hand rested on the curve of her belly, and she felt a small, comforting flutter from within. "I know, my love," she murmured with a smile in the darkness. "Mommy is on her way to get the ice cream, I promise." She snapped open her umbrella, stepping into the downpour for the brief journey to the corner store. The street lamps sputtered against the gloom, a warning in the dark. This was a quiet part of town, home to academics and young, ambitious types, but tonight it felt haunted. As she rounded onto Elm Street, she saw it. A black SUV, its windows like polished obsidian, purring silently at the curb. An unnatural chill, born of something other than the cold rain, crept over her skin. A primal instinct, long asleep in her peaceful life, now screamed a warning. She walked faster. The SUV's doors opened in unison. 3 figures in dark suits emerged into the rain, forming a wall across her path. Scarlett froze, the beat of her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Clutching the umbrella's handle, she took a shaky step back. "Pardon me," she managed, her voice straining for steadiness. "You're in my way." The men remained statues. The rear door of the vehicle swung open, and a 4th man appeared. He owned the storm-swept space he occupied. Tall and broad, his form was cloaked in a dark overcoat. When he moved into the flickering halo of the streetlight, she saw his face, a chiseled jaw, dark hair slicked by the rain, and eyes of an astonishing cold blue. The clinic's audio file description roared through her memory, but it couldn't be. The donor was a secret, a phantom. "Scarlett Hayes," the man rumbled, his voice a gravelly baritone that vibrated in the night. It was the voice from the file, the one that had read her a poem about the ocean. Now it was stripped of poetry, resonating with a cold, lethal power. "Who are you?" she challenged, her arms instinctively shielding her stomach as she angled herself away. "How do you know who I am?" Gabriel closed the distance. His gaze catalogued her drenched coat, the fear blooming in her hazel eyes, and settled on the unmistakable swell of her belly. His air, a raw, foreign feeling of possession, ignited in his chest, hot and violent. "My name is Gabriel Rossi," he stated, halting 2 feet from her. The rain seemed to avoid him. "And you're carrying something of mine?" Scarlett's breath caught. Rossi. The name detonated in her mind. All of Boston knew the Rossi name. They controlled the shipyards, the unions, the city's politicians. They were the syndicate. "No," she whispered, staggering backward as the umbrella fell from her fingers, clattering onto the pavement. "You're mistaken. I used a clinic, a legal, anonymous donor." "Your file was a lie," Gabriel cut in, his voice dangerously smooth. "Dr. Lane sold you my bloodline to settle his gambling debts. The architect of your dream was a common thief, a theft he paid for with his life this evening." The weight of his statement crushed her. Paid with his life. A blinding animal panic took hold of Scarlett. She pivoted and ran, heedless of the slick, rain-soaked concrete. Escape was the only thought. She didn't get 5 yards. A strong arm wrapped around her waist, deliberately clear of her abdomen, and lifted her from the ground as if she weighed nothing. A scream tore from her throat as she struggled, her fists pounding against unyielding muscle. "Let me go! Somebody help!" she cried, kicking frantically. Gabriel secured her arms, his hold like iron bands, but carefully avoiding her belly. "Be still, Scarlett. If my intent was to harm you, you'd already be gone inside your own home." He carried her to the SUV, depositing her inside the opulent leather cabin. He followed her in, and the heavy door thudded shut, instantly silencing the storm and her cries. In the front, a man named Silas engaged the locks, and the SUV peeled away from the curb. Scarlett retreated to the far corner of the spacious seat, her body racked with sobs, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "What will you do to us?" She wept, one hand protectively on her stomach. "I swear I had no idea. You can have the money. I'll go away. I'll sign anything. Just please let me have my baby." Gabriel shed his wet overcoat, his face a mask as he observed her collapse. She was a civilian, fragile, and completely unprepared for the world that had just consumed her. "You cannot comprehend the reality you've been dragged into," Gabriel said, his tone lethally quiet. "In my world, lineage is everything. It is currency, it is power, and it is a weakness to be exploited. The second the Corsetti family learns a Rossi heir is growing inside an unprotected woman in Cambridge, they will dispatch a team to cut that child from your body." A strangled sob escaped Scarlett's lips as she buried her face in her hands. It was a nightmare. It had to be. "You sought a donor, Miss Hayes," Gabriel went on, leaning toward her, the air filling with the scent of rain and rich cologne. "Instead, you chose a king, and my legacy does not gestate in some vulnerable 2-bedroom apartment." "So you'll what?" she cried, her gaze lifting to meet his with terrified defiance. "Lock me up and steal my child after it's born?" "I will ensure you survive," Gabriel corrected her. "As of this moment, you are a ghost to the world. Your townhouse is being cleared. Your employer has been informed of your sudden relocation overseas. You are now property of the Rossi Syndicate." "This is kidnapping. You can't." "This is salvation," Gabriel stated coldly, turning his gaze to the blurring city lights beyond the tinted glass. "Welcome to the family, Scarlett." The SUV raced into the night, aimed for the fortified walls of the Rossi compound. Scarlett's hand rested on her belly as she shivered uncontrollably in the climate-controlled car. She had paid a fortune for a quiet, perfect life. What she had bought was a gilded cage, and the monster holding the only key was the father of her unborn child. Scarlett awoke to the scent of rich espresso and the profound, heavy quiet of a room far too grand. She blinked against the morning sun pouring through immense windows. For a moment, her mind was a blissful blank. Then the crushing horror of the night before descended upon her. This wasn't her Cambridge home. This was a massive suite, torn from the pages of a design magazine featuring modern fortresses. The walls were paneled in somber dark walnut. The bed was draped in Egyptian cotton so fine it felt like a shroud, and the door was bolted from the other side. As she sat up, Scarlett's hand flew to her stomach. "We're all right," she murmured to her baby, her voice a fragile tremor. "We're okay." A silver tray on the nightstand held a cup of decaf coffee, fresh fruit, and with a jolt of ice in her veins, her specific brand of prenatal vitamins. Next to it was her bottle of Calrea sea salt neroli lotion taken directly from her own bathroom. The invasion of her life was total. They had erased her world while she slept. The heavy door clicked open. Gabriel Rossi entered, dressed in a flawless charcoal suit, minus a tie. He didn't look like a mobster. He looked like a cutthroat corporate executive, which was a truth of its own. "Good morning," Gabriel's low voice rumbled, seeming to shake the silent room. He didn't bother asking if she had rested. He crossed to the seating area by the windows, settled into an armchair, and simply watched her with those chilling, pale blue eyes. "You can't hold me here," Scarlett said, clutching the duvet to her chin, attempting a strength she could not fail. "I have a career, a life. I have medical appointments. When I'm a no-show, someone will raise an alarm." "Your company received your resignation at 6 this morning," Gabriel answered calmly, crossing his legs. "You took an incredibly generous offer to manage the restoration of a Swiss estate. Your lease is settled, your apartment empty. Your possessions are in a secure facility under my name. Regarding your health, Dr. Harrison, a premier obstetrician, is currently establishing a private clinic for you downstairs. You will want for nothing." Scarlett could only stare, aghast at the chilling proficiency of her own deletion. "In one night, you made me disappear." "I made you safe," Gabriel corrected, his jawline tensing. "You operate under the false belief that you are my captive, Scarlett. You are not. You carry the Rossi air. Out there, you are prey. In here, behind steel gates and 50 armed guards, you are a queen." "I never wanted to be a queen," she spat, hot tears of rage burning her eyes. "I just wanted to be a mother. I paid for cells in a vial, not a life sentence in the Mafia." Gabriel rose and crossed the room in 3 predatory strides, stopping by the bed to stand over her. The air around him was thick with the scent of bergamot and menace. "You didn't purchase cells, you purchased my dynasty." Gabriel's voice fell to a menacing whisper. "And my dynasty is not yours to risk. The Corsetti family has spent 3 generations trying to extinguish my line from this city. When Dominic Corsetti learns of your existence, your innocence will not save you. He would have that child cut from your womb simply to send me a message. You are not leaving. My chefs will prepare your meals. My doctors will oversee your health, and you will remain alive. Are we clear?" Scarlett swallowed, the starkness of his threat finally shattering her disbelief. His eyes held no room for doubt, only a chilling, violent certainty. "Yes," she breathed. "Good," Gabriel replied, his mask of detached courtesy sliding back into place. "A maid, Clara, will help you dress. Dr. Harrison awaits you in the East Wing in 1 hour." For the following 3 weeks, Scarlett's existence fell into a rhythm of terrifying luxury. The sprawling grounds were hers to wander, but always with a quiet, heavily armed guardian named Matteo following 20 paces behind. She was provided a personal chef, a private pool, and a library stocked with rare architectural volumes Gabriel had sourced just for her. To him, she was a precious, fragile vessel. He would visit twice daily, his questions clinical about the baby's heart rate or her iron levels. There was no warmth, no kindness. She was simply the vessel carrying his legacy. But Scarlett was an architect. She knew structures and she knew their breaking points. She observed the staff, memorized the guard rotations, and mentally mapped the estate. Her focus turning to Clara, the nervous young maid. Clara was always on edge. She never met the guards' gazes and seemed to perspire constantly, even within the climate-controlled corridors. One afternoon, as Scarlett rested, she felt something hard and metallic beneath her pillow while adjusting it. She drew it out, a cheap, prepaid burner phone. Scarlett's heart hammered her ribs. She glanced toward the bathroom, where the sound of Clara drawing a bath echoed. Under the cover of the rushing water, Scarlett switched the device on. A single, unread message waited. "We know where you are. We can extract you. Be at the South Gate tonight at 2 a.m. DC. Her breath caught. DC, Dominic Corsetti. Scarlett perched on the mattress, the cheap plastic of the phone feeling like a hot coal in her hand. The offer was a siren's call, a path out, a return to the anonymity she desperately missed. She saw herself grabbing a bag, slipping by Matteo, and vanishing into the darkness. But the vision of Gabriel's cold, unyielding eyes intruded. He would have that child cut from your womb. Why would a rival mob boss orchestrate a rescue? He wouldn't. He aimed to ruin Gabriel, and the surest path was to extinguish his heir before he could draw breath. That gate was not an escape. It was an execution for her and her unborn child. Scarlett rose to her feet. She packed no bag. She did not wait for 2 a.m. She strode directly from her suite, past Clara's shocked gasp from the bathroom, and descended the main staircase. "Miss Hayes?" Matteo materialized from the shadows, blocking her path. "You need your rest." "Take me to Gabriel," Scarlett commanded, her voice trembling but firm. "Now!" Matteo's brow furrowed, but he complied, guiding her through a labyrinth of hallways toward Gabriel's study in the West Wing. He rapped once on the heavy mahogany doors and pushed them open. Gabriel stood at a large desk discussing shipping logs with Silas. Both men glanced up, startled by her abrupt arrival. Gabriel's gaze went first to her belly, a swift check for harm before meeting her eyes. "What is it?" he demanded, his tone clipped. Scarlett advanced and slapped the burner phone onto the polished surface of his desk. "Your security is compromised," Scarlett announced, her words resonating in the cavernous silence. "Clara put this under my pillow. DC offered an extraction at the South Gate tonight." The atmosphere in the room turned to ice. Silas cursed under his breath, his hand instinctively going to his weapon, but a raised hand from Gabriel stopped him. Gabriel ignored the phone, his attention fixed solely on Scarlett for what felt like the very first time. The cold detachment in his stare cracked, revealing a glint of genuine surprise and something more. Respect. "You could have taken the offer," Gabriel said, his voice lowering to a deeper register. "You could have made the call. You despise it here." "I despise being a captive," Scarlett shot back, her arms instinctively shielding her stomach. "But I am not a fool, Gabriel. I understand Corsetti has no intention of saving me. He wants my baby dead, and no matter what kind of monster you are to everyone else, you are the only one who wants this child to live." Gabriel moved from behind the desk, closing the space between them until she could feel his presence. His large, calloused hand hovered over the phone before closing around it. He squeezed, and the cheap plastic shattered with a loud crack that echoed in the charged quiet. "Silas," Gabriel commanded, his eyes still locked on Scarlett's. "Find Clara. Discover exactly what she told them before you break her fingers. Then seal the estate. No one in, no one out." "Yes, boss," Silas replied, turning and marching from the study. Gabriel turned his focus back to Scarlett, who was visibly shaking as the adrenaline began to ebb. Wordlessly, he laid a hand on her lower back, a surprisingly gentle gesture that sent a current up her spine, and guided her to a leather sofa. "Sit," he ordered softly. "You're trembling. Are they coming here?" she asked, her hands clutching her knees as she sank into the supple leather. "Corsetti is rash," Gabriel said, moving to a concealed wall safe. He retrieved a heavy, matte black Sig Sauer, checking the weapon with a deadly, fluid motion. If he planned a 2 a.m. extraction, he already has a team in position. Your absence will likely force his hand. As if summoned by his words, the deep thud of a distant explosion shook the study's reinforced windows. The chandelier overhead swayed ominously. A high-pitched shriek of alarms began to tear through the estate. The lights went out, immediately supplanted by the spectral red glow of the emergency system. "The south gate!" Gabriel bit out, his jaw clenched. A chaotic volley of gunfire erupted outside, its staccato rhythm rolling across the lawns. Scarlett gasped, her hand flying to her lips. It was happening! The brutality she'd only witnessed on screens was now battering the walls of her world. Gabriel crossed the room in an instant, seizing her arm and pulling her from the couch. "We move to the bunker now." He pulled her into the corridor, which had descended into controlled chaos. Men in tactical gear sprinted past, barking commands as the scent of smoke and sulfur bled through the vents. They made it to the grand foyer just as the massive front doors buckled from a powerful blow. "Go!" Gabriel yelled, shoving Scarlett behind his body as he leveled his pistol. They raced toward a hidden door behind a large Renaissance tapestry. Gabriel entered a code on a concealed keypad, and a heavy steel door slid aside. He thrust Scarlett through the opening just as the main doors of the mansion finally splintered and burst inward. Gabriel fired 3 rounds into the foyer, felling a masked attacker before he ducked inside the safe room, slamming the door. The lock shot home with a heavy, final thud, plunging them into darkness until the bunker's internal lights flickered on. The space was small, concrete-lined, and filled with survival supplies. The abrupt silence was a stark contrast to the mayhem outside. Scarlett pressed herself against the cold wall, sliding to the floor. She hugged her knees, fighting back a sob. Gabriel activated the external monitors, his gaze sweeping over grainy feeds of his men battling on the grounds. He was a general observing his war, his face a mask of brutal focus. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through Scarlett's abdomen, and she gasped. She clutched her stomach, her eyes widening in fear. "Gabriel!" He whipped around, his gun lowering. In a heartbeat, he was kneeling before her. "Are you hit? Is there blood?" "No," she gasped, her eyes squeezed shut. "It's not." The baby." Gabriel's hands hovered near her, uncertain, a rare expression of pure terror on his stoic face. He cautiously laid his large, warm hand flat against her stomach. Through the fabric of her dress, a sharp, undeniable kick met his palm. And then another. Gabriel went utterly still. The sounds of the battle raging above them seemed to dissolve. He stared at her stomach, his pale blue eyes wide, completely undone by the tiny, powerful assertion of life against his hand. For the first time, he felt the truth of his child, not as a concept, not as a bloodline needing protection, but as a living part of himself. He raised his gaze to meet Scarlett's, which were filled with tears. In the bunker's dim red glow, the chasm between the merciless syndicate boss and the frightened mother closed, leaving only two souls terrified of losing the one thing that had suddenly become everything. For one long, suspended beat inside that concrete tomb, the war outside ceased to exist. Gabriel Rossi, a man whose empire was built on ruthless calculation and cold-blooded reason, did not move. His hand rested on Scarlett's swollen belly, his pale blue eyes riveted to the spot where his unborn son had just announced his arrival. A second, gentler flutter pulsed against his palm. It was a small, silent defiance against the brutal truth of their world. As his hand retreated, he stared at his own fingers, suddenly alien things. The iron facade that defined the chief of the Rossi syndicate showed a hairline fracture, exposing the raw humanity beneath. His gaze found Scarlett still shivering against the cold wall, arms a protective cage around her body. "You felt it, didn't you?" she breathed, her voice a ghost against the drone of the bunker's life support. "I did," Gabriel answered, his own voice heavy with an emotion he could not name. It was more than biology. It was a life. His life. He rose, the Sig Sauer at his side now just dead weight, his entire bearing shifting from that of a jailer to a guardian sworn to his post. "You are safe, Scarlett, I give you my word. Nothing will harm you here." Before a reply could form, the bunker's heavy steel door hummed with a deep vibration. The secure radio on Gabriel's hip hissed to life, tearing the quiet. "Boss," Silas's voice came through, frayed but firm. "It's done. Their assault team is gone. We lost 4. The estate's perimeter is secure, but the main house is heavily damaged." Gabriel's eyes turned to flint. The fleeting vulnerability was gone, eclipsed by cold command. "Understood. Get the vehicles ready. We're moving out." He turned, offering his hand to Scarlett. She looked at his palm, large, scarred, an instrument of incredible violence, and for the first time saw not a weapon, but her only salvation. She laid her smaller hand in his, and he drew her to her feet. His touch was a study in gentleness, a conscious act of care. Gabriel keyed a code, and the steel door slid away, unveiling the carnage in the grand foyer. A gasp caught in Scarlett's throat as she covered her mouth. The magnificent walnut walls were savaged, chewed apart by gunfire. The Renaissance tapestry that had hidden the bunker now lay in smoldering tatters on the marble. Glass from the shattered front windows crunched underfoot like malevolent ice in the red emergency lighting. The air was thick with the coppery tang of gunpowder and blood. 2 of Gabriel's men were hauling a body in tactical black through the ruined main entrance. "Look away," Gabriel murmured, moving to stand between her and the blood pooling at the base of the staircase. He became her shield, a living wall between her and the ruin as he led her through the debris. Outside, the storm had broken, leaving a damp, biting cold. A convoy of 3 black-armored Maybachs waited, their engines a low, guttural growl in the driveway, their headlamps slicing through the gloom. Mateo stood beside the lead vehicle, an M4 carbine held ready. He pulled open the heavy rear door as they came near. Gabriel guided Scarlett into the plush interior before settling beside her. Silas claimed the front seat, the door thudding shut. "Where are we going?" Scarlet whispered as the convoy sped down the long driveway, abandoning the smoldering estate to the night. "The Seaport District," Gabriel replied, his gaze sweeping the dark woods through the bullet-resistant glass. "I have a secure penthouse there, the Ritz-Carlton. It doesn't exist on any official record, bought through 3 separate blind trusts. The security is military grade. No one leaves that private elevator without my voice." "What about Clara?" Scarlet asked, a sudden memory of the terrified maid who had unwittingly started it all. Silas shifted to the passenger seat. "She didn't make it, Miss Hayes. When the attack began, she panicked and ran for a service exit. She was caught in the crossfire from Corsetti's team." They had no concern for their own source. Scarlet's eyes fell shut as a cold wave of sickness rolled through her. A woman was gone, men were gone, all of it ignited by a clinical transaction in a sterile room in Cambridge. The sheer weight of the violence was crushing her. Gabriel saw the color drain from her face. He reached into a small cooler, twisted the cap from a bottle of water, and pressed it into her hand. "Drink," he commanded softly. "She was only a maid," Scarlet whispered, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "She was so scared." "She was a vulnerability," Gabriel corrected, but the usual ice in his tone had thawed. He leaned his head back, rubbing his jaw. "But she was also a sign of a much deeper rot." Corsetti's team moved like ghosts past the outer sensors. They knew the patrol schedules. They knew your exact room. Clara was a piece on the board, but she never had access to that kind of intelligence. "What does that mean?" Scarlet asked, her hand trembling as she sipped the water. "It means the leak is much higher up the chain than a maid," Gabriel said, his pale eyes narrowing in the SUV's darkness. "And whoever our traitor is, they've been laying this groundwork for far longer than a few weeks. That attack, the precision, it takes months of surveillance to execute a breach like that on my grounds." An icy dread began to bloom in Scarlet's chest. She looked at Gabriel, his chiseled features painted by the passing lights of the Boston skyline as they crossed the bridge. "Gabriel," she began, her voice unsteady. Before the clinic, my architectural firm was bought out by a private equity group. They moved my office to the first floor. They replaced all of our security, our computers, our phones. It all happened right as I was beginning my IVF treatments. The world inside the armored vehicle went silent and still. Gabriel was stone. Silas turned completely in his seat, his expression grim as he met his boss's gaze. "The name of this private equity group?" Gabriel asked, his voice dangerously low. "Apex Holdings," Scarlet answered, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Gabriel drew a slim, encrypted smartphone from his coat. "Silas, I want everything on Apex Holdings. Cross-reference their board with every known Corsetti front. Go back 5 years." The remainder of the journey passed in a heavy, dreadful silence. The city blurred into streaks of light beyond the armored windows as they descended into the subterranean garage of the Ritz-Carlton residences. The movement from the SUV to the private elevator was a silent, flawless ballet of security. As the elevator shot upward, Gabriel finally looked at her. The cold, impenetrable mask of the crime lord was gone. In his place was a man finally seeing the true, terrifying scope of the conspiracy that had wrapped itself around his family. "If Apex belongs to Corsetti," Gabriel said quietly, as a soft chime announced their arrival, "then they didn't find you today, Scarlet. They have been watching you from the very beginning." The Ritz-Carlton penthouse was another world, a universe of glass, steel, and white marble that stood in stark opposition to the Rossi estate's oppressive darkness. It offered a breathtaking 360-degree panorama of Boston Harbor and the glittering city. But for all its beauty, the reinforced steel doors and the armed sentinels at every entrance were a stark reminder that she had only traded one gilded cage for another. Before the sun had fully risen, painting the harbor in hues of bruised violet and gold, Dr. Harrison was there. The physician had been escorted in under guard, quickly establishing a portable medical station within the master suite. Scarlett lay against the plush linen, her hands clenched on the mattress as Dr. Harrison slid the smooth Doppler wand across her belly. At the foot of the bed, Gabriel stood watch, his arms crossed. He was unshaven, the stubble on his jaw lending a harder edge to his already sharp features. Then, a sound filled the room, a fast, rhythmic pulse, the undeniable, powerful, and steady beat of a heart. A ragged breath escaped Scarlett's lips as her eyes fluttered closed in a wave of profound relief. Tears slipped from the corners of her eyes, dampening her hair. He's all right. He is truly all right. The heart rate is a strong 145 beats per minute, Dr. Harrison said with a kind smile, handing her a cloth. No distress signals, no contractions. The baby handled the ordeal perfectly. You, however, Miss Hayes, have elevated blood pressure. You are to remain on absolute bed rest for the next 48 hours. Gabriel gave the doctor a curt nod. Matteo will see you out. Leave the necessary equipment. Once they were alone, Gabriel moved to the massive windows, his gaze fixed on the city below. The tension in his broad shoulders was a palpable thing. Scarlett pushed herself up, pulling her silk robe tighter. The crucible of the attack had changed everything between them. The hostility had been burned away, leaving only a raw, shared imperative to survive. Did Silas discover anything about Apex Holdings? She asked, her voice soft in the quiet. Gabriel did not turn. His eyes remained at the harbor. He found exactly what we feared. Apex Holdings is a shell, buried 3 layers deep. The trail ends at a private wealth management firm in Zurich, a firm owned entirely by Dominic Corsetti. Scarlett felt the breath leave her body. They owned my company. They possessed your entire world, Scarlett, Gabriel finally said, turning toward her, the look in his pale blue eyes a fathomless dark. They ran your building's security. They read your work emails, listened to your private calls. The moment you began researching fertility options, they were watching. Scarlett swung her legs from the bed, defying the doctor's insistence on rest. Her mind, honed on blueprints and structural weak points, began assembling the terrible architecture of the conspiracy. She rose and moved toward Gabriel, her bare feet silent across the heated stone. Wait, she breathed, her brow knit in sharp concentration. Dr. Lane, you said he sold your family's legacy to clear a gambling debt with the Irish. That was what Reese confessed, Gabriel confirmed, his jaw set like stone. He was their bookkeeper. He saw the accounts, but he only saw what lay permitted him to. No, Scarlett countered, the understanding striking her like a physical blow. She clutched Gabriel's arm, her fingers pressing into the fine weave of his suit. Gabriel, think, if Corsetti owned my firm, if they had me under total surveillance, what are the chances I just happened upon the one clinic that held the Rossi material, and a doctor just happened to give it to me by mistake? The profound darkness of her words began to register in Gabriel's eyes. widening as the implication took hold. "You believe it was deliberate?" "I believe I was selected," Scarlett whispered, a cold sweat forming on her neck. "I'm 32, unmarried, no close family. I live in a simple townhouse with minimal protection. I am the perfect, isolated target." She crossed to the sleek glass desk where Silas had left a pile of decrypted financial records from the clinic. She tore through the binders until she located the master ledger, her finger tracing its columns with frantic speed. "Look!" she insisted, motioning for Gabriel. He came to stand behind her, peering over her shoulder at the pages, his chest grazing her back. The closeness sent a jolt through her, but she did not waver. "These transfers," Scarlett said, pointing to several large deposits into Dr. Lane's foreign accounts. $3 million. They landed 6 months ago, right as I scheduled my first appointment. But the routing codes are wrong. They aren't from the Irish syndicate. They use very specific crypto services out of Dublin. Gabriel studied the numbers, his trained mind instantly recognizing the financial footprint. The Cayman Islands. That prefix belonged to a bank that served the Corsetti family exclusively. "Lane didn't steal your legacy for a debt," Scarlett said, her voice falling to a horrified whisper as she met Gabriel's gaze. "Corsetti paid him for it. Corsetti gave Dr. Lane $3 million to take your protected file from its vault, place it inside a completely vulnerable civilian, and then set her free." An oppressive silence filled the penthouse. The sheer, malevolent genius of the scheme hung between them. Dominic Corsetti didn't just want the Rossi heir dead. He wanted Gabriel to witness it. He wanted the child born into the most exposed circumstances imaginable, utterly severed from the Rossi syndicate's protection so Corsetti could then eliminate both mother and child without a fight, delivering the final word on who held power. Gabriel's hands clamped the edge of the glass desk, his knuckles straining white. A low, feral sound rumbled from his chest, the sound of pure, murderous fury. He had been masterfully outmaneuvered, and Scarlett had been cast as a pawn in a war she never knew was being waged. "You were the lure," Gabriel stated, the words like acid on his tongue. He truly saw her then, her pale features, the terror tightening her jaw, the instinctive way she shielded her stomach. She hadn't merely purchased a vial from a clinic. She had walked into a trap, meticulously laid by a monster. "They wanted me to have your child just so they could kill him to destroy you," Scarlett cried, her control finally breaking. She stumbled back from the desk, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. I was an incubator for his revenge." In one fluid motion that startled her, Gabriel closed the distance and pulled her hard against his chest. It was not a calculated action, it was raw instinct. His arms encircled her, his face burying in her hair as her sobs broke against him. He held her fast, a solid anchor in the rising storm of her terror. "You are not an incubator," Gabriel swore, his voice a fierce, low growl beside her ear. "You are the mother of my child, and I promise you this, Scarlett. Before this weekend's, Dominic Corsetti is going to drown in his own blood." For the first time since this nightmare began, Scarlett wrapped her arms around Gabriel's waist, holding on to him. In this brutal, violent world, the ruthless head of the mob was her only remaining sanctuary. Suddenly, the piercing ring of a cell phone shattered the room's tense quiet. It was not one of Gabriel's secured devices. It was the heavily encrypted satellite phone Silas had left on the desk, a line used only for the gravest of syndicate emergencies. Gabriel gently released Scarlet, his face hardening into the cold, unreadable mask of a leader. He strode to the desk, his eyes fixed on the flashing screen. There was no identification, only a sequence of zeros. He answered it on speaker, the tension in the room becoming suffocating. "Rossi," Gabriel said, his voice lethally calm. The click of a lighter, followed by the slow exhale of cigar smoke, crackled from the phone. "Gabriel," a smooth, cultured voice answered. "I see you have relocated the woman to the Ritz. A fine choice, much better than that drafty estate of yours." Scarlett's blood ran cold. It was him, Dominic Corsetti. "You crossed a sacred line, Dominic," Gabriel replied evenly, though his free hand was clenched so tightly his nails bit into his skin. "You made this about family. The commission will never approve." Dominic chuckled. It was a dry, empty sound. "The commission only acts on what it can verify, Gabriel. And to the rest of the world, Miss Hayes is merely an unfortunate civilian, caught in the crossfire of a home invasion. Such a tragedy. I hear she is quite lovely. A true shame she will not live to see her third trimester." Gabriel's pale eyes locked with Scarlett's, blazing with a deadly vow. "If you so much as breathe near her, Dominic, I will do more than kill you. I will erase your entire family, root and branch. I will turn your legacy to dust." "Brave words for a man hiding in a glass fortress," Dominic mocked. "Enjoy the scenery, Gabriel. The clock has started. You have 48 hours to sign over the port territories. If you refuse, I will send you the architect's head in a box, along with your bastard heir." The line went dead. The threat lingered in the immaculate air, absolute and suffocating. The war was no longer being fought in the shadows. It was on their doorstep with no avenue for escape. Gabriel lowered the phone, turning to Scarlett with a terrifying resolve in his eyes. They were no longer on the defensive. It was time to bring the war to him. The weight of Dominic Corsetti's ultimatum hung in the penthouse. 48 hours, 2 days before his entire syndicate would crash down upon them. Gabriel stood beside the glass desk, his mind already shifting into the cold calculus of conflict. "Silas," he commanded, his voice stripped of emotion. "I want every soldier we have armed and deployed. Call in our markers from the port. We will strangle their supply lines. We will raid their safe houses. We will burn them out of this city before dawn." "Gabriel, stop," Scarlett interrupted, her voice slicing through the tension. She stood at the vast window, looking out over the city lights, but her gaze was seeing the structural patterns of the buildings. "If you fight them on the street, you start a war that could drag on for months. You don't have that kind of time." "I don't have that kind of time," she repeated, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. "You must sever the head of the serpent tonight." "Dominic is deep inside his fortress," Gabriel said, turning to face her. "He runs his empire from the penthouse of the Apex Tower. It's impenetrable. Biometrics, reinforced plating, and a private army of ex-special forces. A frontal attack would be a massacre." "Not if you understand the building's vulnerabilities," Scarlett replied, a strange, fierce light in her eyes. She moved past him, retrieving a silver laptop from the bag Clara had packed. "Before Apex Holdings moved me to the ground floor, I was the lead conservation specialist for their corporate portfolio. My firm was contracted to handle the retrofitting of the Apex Tower." Gabriel and Silas exchanged a look of disbelief. Gabriel moved to her side as she powered on the laptop, her fingers dancing over the keys, dismantling firewalls she herself had likely helped design. When Apex acquired the tower, they hired one firm to assess its commercial potential, but they used my company to chart its structural integrity, she explained, displaying a complex three-dimensional blueprint of a skyscraper. Dominic believes he is untouchable up there. He'd added private lifts and bulletproof panes, but the tower wasn't his creation. It was a vintage 1930s Art Deco structure, merely armored with modern defenses. Her focus shifted to the substructure. Look here. To bear the load of new steel in the penthouse, fresh foundation pillars were sunk deep. This required sealing the old Prohibition-era ventilation ducts beneath the city. Sealed, Gabriel echoed, his gaze sharpening on the schematics. Not filled with concrete. Precisely, Scarlett affirmed, meeting his eyes. A 3-foot service corridor travels from the old city subway, ascending through the Apex Tower's heart, ending just beyond the plaster of Dominic's inner sanctum. The plan called for concrete, but the contractors Apex used took a shortcut to cut costs, closing it off with simple sheet metal. A slow, predatory grin formed on Gabriel's lips as he looked at the screen. It was a mortal vulnerability in the design, a secret path into the very core of his adversary's fortress. His gaze fell on Scarlett, the historian carrying his heir, who had just delivered his enemy's empire into his hands. "You're magnificent," Gabriel breathed, his sincere reverence making her heart race. He faced his second in command. "Silas, prepare the assault equipment. We're moving below." 3 hours on, deep under the city's financial hub, Gabriel moved through the wet, vermin-filled service tunnels. He wore non-reflective combat attire, a silenced weapon across his torso, flanked by Silas and a team of his 6 deadliest men. The sealed shaft was precisely where Scarlett's plans showed it. An oxidized iron grill, carelessly welded closed, guarded the entrance to the forgotten air system. Silas attached a silent thermal charge. A low hiss and a burst of blinding warmth later, the grill dropped. The ascent was agonizing. 400 feet up, a tight, dark brick flew. Yet a cold, focused rage propelled Gabriel. With each searing muscle, his mind saw Scarlett, trapped and afraid. He remembered that small, defiant kick in his hand. Dominic Corsetti had made his child a gambit. This evening, the contest would conclude. At the apex of the shaft, Gabriel felt the cool sheet metal that stood between them and Dominic's office. Faint voices bled through the barrier. A quiet gesture set Gabriel's team into motion. Silas affixed a breaching strip to the metal's edge. Gabriel raised 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. In the tight confines, the blast was a thunderclap. The metal panel imploded, ripping out a section of drywall in a blinding cloud of plaster. A spectral Gabriel emerged from the haze. The penthouse devolved into bloody mayhem. Dominic's prized guards, their attention fixed on the armored lifts and doors, were utterly stunned by an attack erupting from within their sanctum. With chilling and silent precision, Gabriel and his operatives neutralized them all. The soft pops of suppressed firearms echoed as men fell before they could reach for their own guns. When the chaos subsided, only one target remained besides Gabriel's crew. Dominic Corsetti, a sharp, silver-haired figure in a tailored suit, was cornered at his desk, a golden revolver shaking in his grip. He gazed at Gabriel, then at the ragged breach in his wall, his face a mask of disbelief. "How?" Dominic rasped, his silk tie stained with a subordinate's blood. "It can't be." Gabriel advanced deliberately, his weapon down, his pale blue eyes emanating a frigid, murderous tranquility. You purchased a structure, Dominic, but never troubled yourself with its past. Dominic lifted his revolver with an unsteady hand. I'll end you, Rossi. You, the architect, and the foul thing she carries. Gabriel remained perfectly still. He then moved with startling quickness, seizing Dominic's wrist and wrenching it upward with a sickening crack of bone. The gold weapon fell uselessly. Before a scream could form, Gabriel's knee found the older man's gut, dropping him to the ground, fighting for breath. Towering over his foe, Gabriel drew his Sig Sauer, aiming it at Dominic's forehead. You blundered, Dominic, Gabriel stated. His tone was a deep, menacing rumble. You saw my lineage as a vulnerability to be used. You considered her a mere vessel. Gabriel cocked the hammer, the sound sharp in the stilled, blood-soaked room. She is the matriarch of the Rossi line, and you are already forgotten. He squeezed the trigger. Rain whispered against the Ritz-Carlton's penthouse windows upon Gabriel's return. In the darkness, Scarlett sat on the bed, a thick blanket pulled close. Sleep had eluded her. The heavy, sweet door finally unlatched, and her heart seized. Gabriel appeared at the faint glow. His combat gear was gone, but his dress shirt was fouled with grime, dust, and chilling dark red stains. He appeared drained, battered, yet completely triumphant. Without a word, he went to the marble bathroom, starting the shower at its highest setting. Scarlett rose, the blanket falling away, and went to him. From the doorway, she observed him remove the destroyed shirt, bearing a torso marked with old wounds, a history of his violent existence. He entered the searing spray, hands against the wall, as the water cleansed him of his enemy's blood. She moved into the steam-filled room, heedless of her robe, and held a clean white towel. When Gabriel finally shut off the water and emerged, the hardened mask of the dawn had vanished. He gazed at Scarlett, his pale blue eyes clouded with a deep, weary weight. It is finished, Gabriel rasped. Corsetti is gone. His captains are ceding the port districts to Silas. The danger has passed, Scarlett. You are secure. The child is secure. A strangled sob broke from her. She moved to him, draping the towel over his shoulders, but held on, pressing her face to his wet chest. She inhaled the fragrance of cedar and the essence of the man who leveled a kingdom for her. Gabriel's arms instantly encircled her, pulling her close, leaving a desperate, sacred kiss in her hair. I feared you wouldn't return, she admitted against his skin. I will always return to you, Gabriel pledged, lifting her chin to meet his gaze. You are my family now, Scarlett, both of you. No one will harm you again. 4 months after, the private maternity floor at Mass General was a veritable fortress. 2 armed men in crisp suits guarded the hall, denying access to all but approved staff. Within the sun-drenched delivery room, the cruelty of Gabriel's reality seemed a world away. Scarlett was reclined, spent against the pillows, her hair moist and her breathing labored. Yet her smile was luminous and stunning. Gabriel sat in a chair drawn close to her bed. The merciless leader of the Rossi Syndicate, a man who reigned over an empire of force, was openly crying. He held a small, swaddled infant in his large, hardened hands, a son with a tuft of black hair. Though his eyes were closed, Gabriel knew they were his own pale blue. He is flawless, Gabriel breathed, his voice thick with feeling. He gently stroked his thumb over the infant's incredibly soft skin. Utterly flawless. He has your glare, Scarlett jested faintly, her hand covering his. Gabriel raised his head from his son to Scarlett. In the past 4 months, their bond had evolved. The ornate prison had dissolved into a powerful, unbreakable alliance. He was at every scan, read each parenting manual she acquired, and gradually allowed her to dismantle the fortress around his soul. She was no longer a captive. She was his counterpart, his very heart. "What shall we call him?" Gabriel asked quietly, kissing her brow. Scarlet regarded the man who had purchased her, battled for her, and become the man she had fiercely, improbably come to love. "Leo," Scarlet whispered. "Leo Rossi. It signifies a lion." Gabriel grinned, a true, brilliant smile that lit up his eyes. "Leo, the heir." He glanced down at his boy. "You will command the world, little lion, but not yet. For now, you only need to rest." Scarlet relaxed, her eyes closed, as Gabriel softly settled Leo in her arms. 9 months prior, she entered a clinic, desiring only a simple existence. That was not her fate. She found a Mafia dawn, a criminal dynasty, and a birthright shaped by blood and flame. But with Gabriel's arms around them both, a shield against the world beyond their door, she knew she would never exchange her magnificent, perilous family. Seeking an ordinary life, Scarlet Hayes entered the Lane Institute. With only a checkbook and a fervent hope, she sought to have a baby. What she acquired instead was a criminal kingdom, a clinical exchange meant to avoid the messiness of romance ensnared her in a vicious underworld conflict. Out of the ruin of lies and bloodshed, something permanent took root. Gabriel Rossi, a creature of pure brutality, rediscovered his soul through the woman sent as a weapon against him. Theirs was a connection not forged in quiet moments, but in the crucible of staying alive. Her gilded prison crumbled, and in its place they raised a stronghold of absolute devotion. In the end, Scarlet found the one thing she had always craved: a family, one that was simply more lethal, more savagely loyal, and more exquisitely turbulent than she ever dared to envision.
She thought she was buying peace. That was the first mistake. See, Scarlet walked into that clinic like any normal person chasing a normal dream. Quiet life, cute baby room, warm milk, soft blankets, no drama. But life looked at that plan and said, nah, let's add a mafia war, a dead doctor, and a biological father who can order a city to burn before breakfast. And that is exactly where the lesson punches the audience in the face. The world loves to package danger as convenience. The clinic sold certainty, anonymous donor, clean paperwork, no strings attached, perfect profile, premium genetics. Sounds safe, right? Wrong. That kind of polished perfection is sometimes just chaos in a tuxedo. Scarlet didn't buy evil. She bought a fantasy with no questions asked, and the second people stop asking questions, they become easy prey for systems that profit from their hope. Then Gabriel enters like a human plot twist. He isn't just the donor, he's the storm behind the contract. The guy was supposed to be a ghost, but instead he becomes the most dangerous fact in her life, and here comes the real lesson. Truth does not care how late it arrives. It can show up after the payment clears, after the dream begins, after the nursery is painted. But when it arrives, it rewrites everything. And Scarlet, she could have broken right there. She could have stayed just a victim in someone else's revenge story, but she didn't. That's the part people miss when they only watch for the mafia drama. Her real victory starts when she stops acting like a passive passenger. She reads the trap, refuses Corsetti's fake rescue, and understands faster than anyone else that survival is not about running blindly. Survival is about recognizing who benefits from your fear. That is the life lesson. Not every polished opportunity is a blessing. Not every escape is freedom. Not every person who scares someone is the biggest threat in the room. Sometimes the loud danger is easier to survive than the quiet lie that got someone there in the first place. So yeah, the story throws bullets, betrayals, and big revenge energy everywhere, but underneath all that madness, it says one brutally simple thing. When life offers something that looks too perfect, the smartest person in the room is the one who checks the wiring before touching the switch.